And so in the first Roman numeral chapter entitled The Thing Itself, I went through it one time and I picked out the many names for God. And so that's what I think of this chapter as, because it invites us to go on an adventure, a spiritual adventure, where the first thing that we want to play around with is the idea that this world of form is backed by a spiritual consciousness, that in fact all of it is that we are spiritual creatures having this human experience. And so in this way, we are connected to this immutable power and presence that kind of evades description, that probably our poets do the best job of expressing what it is. And yet at the same time, we've all had an experience of knowing that in some crazy way, in the human experience, we are connected. And that we are all expressing acts of faith within this human life. Now, it could be in basic ways. Let's say when we're in high school, taking an art class or going out for track or tennis, right? Where we're like, well, I don't know if I can, but we step into it anyway, make a leap of faith. Or more importantly, it might be when we exchange vows of fidelity to our beloved. That is an act of faith in love. That there's a connection, that there is this force between us that is bringing us together to step into a life that doesn't look like it maybe if you have more secular idea of what life is, but it is a leap of faith to dedicate and to support and to see and to make witness to your beloved that we're going to strike out and do this thing together. Now, for some of us, it might take us a couple tries. But the intention is still there. In fact, if you do it a second time, you're really stepping out in faith, aren't you? It's also recognizing that there's a lot of stuff that's downloaded into us that gets in the way of our most effective way of expressing life, the science of mind. So we have stuff that's been downloaded into us that has not been reasoned in there. Stuff from our religion of origin, stuff from our parents, of course, stuff from the people we come up with. So if we are hanging out with mean girls all the time, they're telling us all kinds of stuff that probably is not true, 95% of it. And yet here we are, 40 years later, and we still have this nagging thing that it might be true. Because we can even know that it's not true, but it might be true. That's enough to keep us held bound, or that it's original sin, that you fall short of the glory of the Most High, that God loves you, and you better believe or else. A consciousness of coercion versus a consciousness of freedom. This is what Holmes is proposing. A consciousness of freedom rather than coercion. And he says it right off the bat in the first page. To suppose the creative intelligence of the universe would create man in bondage and then leave him bound would be to dishonor the creative power which we call God. To suppose that God could make man as an individual without leaving him to discover himself would be to suppose impossibility. In other words, that sense of curiosity that you have, and maybe that's laid dormant for a while as an adult, because I've seen a lot of life. I've seen a lot of stuff, man, and I know what it's all about now. But really, what we want, even the carpenter said, "Be ye as children." We need that curiosity. We need to cultivate that, to foster it, to understand that this is the creative impulse of life, scratching from the inside, longing to express itself on the outside. the thing itself. Holmes, this is my take on all this, is that we are here to discover God then by discovering ourselves. And by discovering ourselves, we have a deeper relationship with the divine because we heal our old stuff. We heal our old stuff. And we don't inflict our stuff on other people, at least not consciously. So to have parents who grow up, who are committed to raising children, to know the greatness that is within them, and also to embrace the self-responsibility that goes with that, to know that a trained mind is far more powerful than an untrained mind, that an authentic heart that can be vulnerable is far more courageous than a go along to get along crowd. Because what happens is you grow up to be adults who go along to get along. And we've seen the effect of that, in a way, these last few years. Because the world is telling us that we're separate. It's us against them. It's dog eat dog. And that you're not going to get your way in the world unless you put up your dukes, grab the sword and the shield, and slay away. And some of us are very successful with that. And yet we get to the end of that and we go, wow, is this it? And there's lots of bodies around us, but no one to share our life with, except somebody else who wants to slay away. Now, we haven't been created to be gladiators in life. We've been created to discover the creative impulse of life as our life and to allow that to come forward, knowing that the power that's propelling all of it is love itself. That's what we're here to do. We're here to be prodigals, sons and daughters of the Most High, who come to themselves and realize, oh my God, I can think a new way. I can have a new thought. I don't have to live in this muck and mire of struggle and limitation and separation. And instead, I can step into my divine inheritance of abundance, of love. But there's going to be some work to do. We can't just click our heels together and go, I just know it's true because I really want it. We're playing with the law of life. We're playing with a field of mind, a creative field of mind that gives us back, reflects back to us what we put into it. So that all that God is here is reflected back to us. Because we are it. Individualized. And, as Reverend Nicole said, regardless of what has happened to us in the past, regardless of let's say, unskilled parenting, or even some of the horrible things that can happen to someone less blessed in the way I was raised, things can happen. Now, that doesn't mean that my Irish father's raging stuff did not have a limiting effect on my life. You don't have no idea. That was an act of will to find the appropriate word just now. But the Spirit is not bound by precedent. That means that whatever's happened in the past is... There was a great mystic and teacher named Maureen Hoyt who said that it's for information only. And maybe you got that from someone else. I don't know. Yeah. The past is for information only. Can you feel the truth in that idea resonating? It's true even as a younger person, that the past is for information only. And so we can have, really what we are on is this, the possibility of a beautiful discovery of a life experience that has depth and breadth and creativity, an energy, a creative energetic that allows the creative impulse of life to express itself through our life, even if it just makes us a more courageously loving person. That would be enough. Even if it makes us stretch ourselves to where we can get into, triangle pose and not pull anything. Even if it means that we read materials that we've been over 1,000 times, whether it's scriptural or whatever, and we get a new insight. That's enough for that day. Because day by day, as we go along, being open to the creative impulse of life, we're going to be 365 times more creative than we were last year. So we don't have to set the world on fire. We just need to set our heart on fire. And that's by connecting with each other. So this spiritual thing is big. Infinite's a lot. Infinite creativity is a lot of creativity. Whether it's individualized within ourselves, those of us who have meditation practice, we know the infinite, the depth of the infinite, that there's always discovery, and then we know that the universe itself, infinite, and all is mind. So this is the first big concept, that all of it is a field of mind, that the way that this thing that we stick a label on called God, G-O-D, call it what you will, the way that it makes itself known in all places spontaneously as one, at one time, that contains all intelligence, that is the creator of all that is that it's all a field of mind that is bound by nothing except the law of its own being, which is also infinite. That's some real metaphysical stuff there. Mind, the thing, spirit, causation is beyond and yet not beyond our grasp. Beyond in that it is so big, within that wherever we grasp at it, we are it to the extent that we can grasp it. So we don't arrive anywhere. We are on this spiral evolution of greater and greater awareness of the divine. And I'll tell you, we really know we're onto something when we start seeing it in others, particularly people we don't care for so much. And they don't need to be people you know personally. If you got a resentment for some characters out there in the world of form, to see the divine in that too. Now we're getting somewhere. I'm working on that one. Wherever we grasp at it, we are it to the extent that we grasp it. But since it is infinite, we can never encompass it. We shall never encompass God, and yet we shall always be in God and of God. And this is probably one of the first big caveats for me, because I remember being in my first Science of Mind class with Reverend Maureen and saying, you can't say that, that's blasphemy. There's only one guy who was of God, and they nailed him to a cross. And she said, well, just stay with it. Stay with it. In fact, I want to make sure I say this, so I'm going to share this quote here. She said something like this: "If we try to find something difficult to grasp, then we shall never grasp it, because we shall always think of it as being incomprehensible. The mind which we discover within us is the mind that governs everything." This is the thing itself, and we should recognize its simplicity, which is an irony, since it takes this book to explain that simplicity. It's crazy, right? But why is that? Because we think of all the reasons why it's not so. So there are many names for God. Here's just some of them. Now, Big Sweetie is not in the textbook. I think that was Helen Street, right? So one of Maureen's teachers way back when. Big Sweetie. And then, what is your favorite? Because it doesn't matter what I think. What matters is what you think. What allows you to connect to life on a deep level and to be more creative, to be more authentic, to allow yourself to be vulnerable enough to learn something new about yourself, about another person, even if it means shedding a few tears or even letting go of some old stuff. This teaching to me is not easy. The easier, softer way is just to proclaim that I'm saved and follow 10 rules. And just say, okay, yeah, you're right. I am a sinner. I am all of these things. Here's my money. Let's build that big-ass church. Or we can raise the bar and practice what Jesus actually said. And to own, it is done unto me as I believe. So what do I believe? Am I willing to believe something new? Am I willing to take my belief and create my most effective life? Not even an effective life. Am I willing to build a life that is happy, joyous, and free in all of the wildest ways that I can imagine? Am I willing to do that? Because if I'm willing to live that way and to give the glory to Spirit, to understand that all I'm doing is engaging with this creative field of mind and then allowing it, sometimes with my knees knocking, I do believe in spooks, but then we do it anyway. This is a powerful way to live. And all of the great mystics in any faith system you can imagine have known this to be so. They've recognized that a lot of the tripwires within our own experience of the human condition are distractions that keep us from realizing our full potential as an individualized expression of the Godhead, whatever we know that to be. So really, we are called to be the Christ in the Western parlance. We are called to be creators. We are called to step into exploring, what is it I want for my life? And what am I willing to train my mind to focus on to bring that forth? We come to learn that the Spirit operates as mind, that we are the individualized expression of this mind of Spirit, and as such, our mind reflects the same process in which the mind of Spirit acts. Spirit works for us by working through us. that the self-contemplation of the spirit becomes the thing it thinks about, that the thing that we think about the most is what materializes. So the old joke within religious science is that if I'm a religious, claim to be a religious scientist and know the good and the glory of the divine, is there enough evidence to convict me? What is the demonstration of my life? If it's struggle, right, we can shift that. But if it's been struggle for 3 or 4 years, you might want to look at that. What's my part in that? And let's face it, there are systemic things. Discrimination for race, for gender identity, all of these things, that's a real thing. But what are we going to do about it? Surrender to hate or step into love? Right? And to open our heart to allies who will support us in our greatest expression, because they're out there. This center is full of them. Making the self-contemplation of spirit becoming the thing it thinks about, making things out of itself, bound only by the truth of its own being, which again is also infinite. That the great love of the universe must be one with the great law of its own being, and we approach love through the law. Now, what the heck does that even mean? Right? When you're brand new. Well, like all natural laws, it must be demonstrated to be legit. So electricity had always been available. It's been around since the Big Bang. Humans in our present form, Cro-Magnon man, if you will, Homo sapiens sapiens, has been around for about 40,000 years. We've had the same brain capacity and so forth to work things out. And yet we could not use electricity until we discovered it. And then even after we discovered it, we had to figure out how to utilize it. So if there is this one mind out there, then how do we prove it? Well, we prove it by using it, by utilizing it. First, through our connection with it, understanding that love is the propellant within the whole deal, a love that is so pure, that is cosmic, bound by nothing, that has a component within it that it can only say yes to itself, and that our mind is impressing itself within it and cannot be returned to us void. Now we're going to look at the question Ernest Holmes will post within these next 3 weeks. And so if this is so, then why are so many people unhealed, sick, and afraid? What about that? So we're going to look at all the whatabouts over these next 3 weeks. I know I had them. I know you have them. And we can get, by sticking with it and not pitching the whole proposition, but instead allow ourselves to go deeper, that we can have a greater expression of life as our life. And Holmes recognizes this, and he says that so we know that in prayer some are healed and others are not, but the answer is not that God has responded more to some and not others, but rather that some have responded more to God than others, that their prayer has responded by co-responding. Now, this is not to take that little thing there and then start flagellating yourself because you haven't done it right, but rather to show compassion and love for yourself by simply starting again. The examples that Reverend Nicole made. Because we had a donut for breakfast doesn't mean we have to have something that is not in our best interest for lunch. And I don't know why you kept looking at me while you were saying all those things. She's been reading my mail, I think. All right, so let's just take a deep, conscious breath. That's what happens when I got off my notes. You get the deluge. So let's think about the thing itself. What is it we know the Spirit to be? And I would even say this, that if there's a little bit of confusion in there, then you're on the right track. That is the right track. If it's certainty outside of the fact that God is, you're on the right track. So today, let's practice being the mystic in our own life. Even if we have to do it from a let's pretend kind of way. To see within everyone we meet today, everyone we think about, everyone we see on television or hear on the radio, that we see the face of the divine, and do it in a conscious way. And just breathe into it. Let's breathe on that. Breathe into that and see if you feel different on the exhale. And then come back next week. Dust off your textbook. Take 10 minutes to read 10 pages. And come back next week and we'll check in with each other.